Stay tuned to see my top tiny cleanup crew for tiny tanks. So every aquarium needs a cleanup crew, and Nano and Pico tanks are no exception. In this video we're going to be looking at the tiniest of cleanup crews for you to put into your Nano aquariums. Before you see an array of tiny little creatures which will help you keep your aquarium clean. Now, despite their size, all marine aquariums need a cleanup crew. A cleanup crew is vital for keeping nuisance things like algae and detritus down. The problem with nano tanks is they're a lot smaller than their bigger reef tank brothers, and this makes finding a suitable cleanup crew an issue. A lot of the species which you could easily put into a full-size reef tank just will not fit into a Nano or Pico aquarium. But don't worry, there are some species which are suitable for the task. I'm going to go through 8 different species which are suitable for a Nano or Pico tank to help keep it clean and make your life easier. Now, the first species I'm going to talk to you about isn't one that is normally celebrated. It's sometimes seen as a bit of a pest because of how fast it reproduces. But in my opinion, it's got to be one of the best mini cleaners you can get for a Nano aquarium, and that is the humble dove snail. Dove snails are the equivalent of a freshwater ram's horn snail. They are essentially a complete herbivore snail, and they don't get particularly big. The reason why they are sometimes frowned upon being in an aquarium is at the rate that they reproduce. Dove snails reproduce at an incredible rate, but they do so based upon the amount of food that's available to them. So if you have an aquarium that doesn't have too much food, then they won't reproduce that quickly. But also, they only reproduce because there's a lot of algae for them to eat, because that's all they eat. So the more dove snails you have, the more algae is going to be eaten. So it's kind of a win-win situation. Now, I like dove snails purely because they are tiny, they get into all the nooks and crannies, and they'll graze in small areas which other larger snails can't get to. Another reason I like them is because there are different types. We have lightning dove snails, which have an attractive yellow stripe and are slightly larger. And then we also have the gold lightning dove snail, which are a gold orange colour with even more lines on. So they can even be an attractive species, a centrepiece for your Nano or Pico aquarium. The next species we're going to be looking at are the mini brittle stars. Now, mini brittle stars don't tend to be available for sale, but they appear quite commonly on live rock that you may purchase or corals. You'll know you have them because you'll tend to see little legs sticking out from the rockwork, and they look a little bit like worms, but they are in fact these mini brittle stars. Now, like their larger cousins, mini brittle stars are detritivores. They use their legs to capture any floating particles or any leftover food that may pass by. They'll also clean underneath rockwork and corals, doing an excellent job of getting the scraps that other things miss. Mini brittle stars, although not really an optional addition, are well worth having in your Nano aquarium, and if you see them, do not remove them because they're doing a great job. Everybody loves a shrimp in their aquarium, and the most common shrimp for people to put into their aquarium are cleaner shrimp. Now, cleaner shrimp are very misunderstood shrimp because they're called cleaner shrimp because they clean fish and don't actually clean the aquarium very well. And that's why I'm not including cleaner shrimp on this list. I'm actually going to be talking about the peppermint shrimp. Now, peppermint shrimp are a very good shrimp for a cleanup crew, and they don't quite get as big as a cleaner shrimp, which makes them an excellent addition for a Nano aquarium. Peppermint shrimps aren't quite as popular as cleaner shrimp because they're not as brightly coloured, but also you don't see so much of them. They lurk in the background doing their job cleaning up your aquarium. But they're very good scavengers and will clean up any missed food, but they also have an excellent benefit of eating aptasia, which is something a cleaner shrimp can't do. So I'm including peppermint shrimp on my list of top cleaners for all aquariums, but more specifically Nano and Pico tanks. Up in at number 4 we have the Bumblebee Snail. Now, this is a very misunderstood snail. It has a good reputation, but it also has a dark side. Now, in its purest form, the Bumblebee Snail is essentially a detritivore. It goes around and finds anything that's died or is left over and basically consumes that as part of its diet. Bumblebee snails don't tend to eat much algae, but they are very good at cleaning up after messy fish. Now, unfortunately, bumblebee snails have got a bit of a bad reputation for eating corals and also eating other snails. Now, while it's only anecdotal that they eat corals, it's definitely true that they will eat snails when they don't have enough other food available to them. However, that makes them quite useful, because if you have an outbreak of our much beloved dove snails, then you can pop a few of these bumblebee snails in there, and they act a lot like the freshwater assassin snails, just keeping the population of the pest snails down. But another good thing that they'll do is they'll also keep down the population of bristleworms. So if you're overrun with bristleworms, then these snails may be the answer to your problem. Other than that, they're just a great, more colourful version of an aureus snail. And that brings me beautifully onto my next candidate for a tiny cleanup crew for nano aquariums, and that is the aureus snail. Now, aureus snails are used very commonly in full-size aquariums, but they are also excellent cleanup crew for your nano or pico aquarium. Now, what makes them so excellent is the fact that you can trust them. You know an aureus snail will just do aureus snail things, and it won't go off and eat your corals or attack any fish. Aureus snails live underneath the sand, and what they do is they wait with their little snout poking up through the sand and wait for any food or anything to die, or essentially anything that they think smells like food. Now, this is especially good in the case of dead fish or extra food, because they'll hoover it up before it has time to rot down into ammonia and potentially cause your aquarium to crash. Next up, we're looking at hermit crabs. Hermit crabs are the quintessential addition for a cleanup crew for an aquarium, and this is especially true for nano or pico aquariums. Hermit crabs spend the majority of their time moving around your aquarium, searching through the rockwork and little crevices for scraps to eat, but also they will graze naturally on any algae that are growing within your system. Their natural foraging and grazing behaviour makes them very, very useful in the reef aquarium, because they can graze on areas that other creatures can't. There are lots of different types of hermit crabs available on the market, and most of them are suitable for a nano reef. The best species to pick, however, would be the red legs, rock hermits, or blue leg hermits. Blue leg hermits being the smallest species available, so are ideal for those tiny tanks. The thing we're going to talk about isn't an invert, it's actually a fish. And the fish is blennies. Blennies make amazing cleanup crew for small tanks. Despite being incredibly hard to film, they are actually very, very good algae grazers. You can see this one here doing what he does best, going around scraping off nuisance algae and sediment from things I'd rather not have nuisance algae or sediment growing on. Now, there are many types of blenny, and some of them get a little bit too large for a nano tank, but there are also many types which are very suitable and also make a very characterful, quizzical addition to your pico or nano reef. Last on my list is the turbo snail. Turbo snails are probably the most common cleaner for any reef aquarium, and for nano and pico tanks this isn't any different. Turbo snails get a lot bigger than any other cleaning snail that I've already mentioned. Turbo snails are still excellent additions to a nano tank. There's no real mystery to a turbo snail. We know exactly what they'll do. They spend most of their time going around the glass and the rockwork, grazing on any nuisance algae, which is fantastic in terms of keeping your aquarium clean. The turbo snail I'd like to suggest you use would actually be the banded trochus. Out of all the turbo snails available on the market, they seem to be the hardiest, and they're also able to self-right, which many other turbo snails aren't able to do. This is particularly useful should they fall on their backs. They can actually turn themselves over, where other species of turbo snails struggle. The downside to turbo snails is because of their size, they sometimes can't get into any of the nooks and crannies that the smaller grazing snails can. And that's why you should always team them up with other types of cleanup crew so that all bases get covered. Now, although I haven't mentioned him, and you're probably wondering why, I'm going to give a little shout out to the humble emerald crab. I have missed him out, and the reason being is, when emerald crabs are fully grown, they can sometimes eat small fish. Now, this is a bit of a problem in a nano or pico reef, because you're probably going to have some small fish. However, emerald crabs are excellent algae eaters, and if you are brave enough or don't have any small fish in your nano or pico aquarium, then you could probably add one without any issues. So, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and more importantly, I hope it's been entertaining and educational for you. If you liked it, please like the video. If you dislike this video, please dislike the video. Either way, it lets me know how you felt about my content. If you want to, please subscribe to my channel as well, and hit the bell so you can see further updates and videos from me. As always, thanks very much for watching, and happy fish keeping!